Yeah. How y'all be, man? My fellow hairless makes of the blue sea. This is me. We back at it again, man. Y'all already know that hot and fresh Friday fire chapter. We back. Let's just jump into it, man. I'm excited. Chapter 1062. Chapter 1062. The Land of Science. Dexter's Laboratory. Dr. Doom. Any of those characters. It can all happen, right? Dr. Robotnik. Let's jump into the cover story, man. Honestly, that could be its own separate discussion. But I'll just share a few things or talk about a few points. Right, the most obvious answer is is da 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 da. My man Aokiji, right? Just frees everybody. Um, which is cool because I forget the name of the people or person. I haven't watched it in a while, but there was a fanfic that it got some tracking. I think it was last summer. I'm confused. I don't say confused. I don't exactly remember the time, but there was a fanfic someone did of Blackbeard basically invading Whole Cake Island, and so like I wasn't even thinking about Blackbeard during this time. You know, as far as like what this cold blooded voyage will like everybody who's going to be involved in it. That's not even a person. I wasn't even thinking that, especially because we just saw Blackbeard, you know, a couple of chapters ago in Amazon Lily. So, but that's what I was thinking about. I was like, oh, I remember that dope fanfic that got pretty popular, and it was Katakuri fighting the Blackbeard pirates, literally 1v1, like 1v all by himself, as he should, right? Go to Curry. The Mochi man. Y'all know how I feel about Katakuri. But that's what I was thinking about. And I'm like, well, the only reason why Akita should be here is for rubbings of the poneglyph. Either that or something to do with the tech, right? Because Blackbeard just fought Keaton Mihawk a couple of chapters ago, where Blackbeard, who, from what we've seen, doesn't really have an interest in technology, but at the same time, it doesn't mean he's unaware, right, of cloning and all this other stuff, because he was just like, oh, this is a different pacifista, where with devil fruits, you know, he seems to care about those. But I don't know, you know, obviously the cover story takes place in, well, I won't say obviously, but as far as we know, it's happening in real time. So what it does do, though, is eliminate the situation, at least for the time being, that Aokiji, as far as the sword connection and what's going to happen if he meets Kobe, or if he even knows that Blackbeard took Kobe, which I'm sure he does at this point. I don't see why he wouldn't, but that might not be on the table for the time being if he was all the way here in Whole Cake Island. And I was just thinking, because, you know, not necessarily a popular flavor of ice cream, just depends on where you live and what the population density is for certain places. But, you know, mochi flavored ice cream is normal where I live. So that's all I was thinking about. Like, oh no, not frozen mochi. But anyway, let's just jump into the chapter, man, because they like the name of the title says, adventure is upon us, and everything that we've seen so far for the designs of like the environment and these robots and stuff like that. This is wild. I like it a lot. I like it a lot, a lot, a lot. I don't know a ton of sci-fi stuff, you know, but from what I've seen so far, like some of these references look pretty familiar. They just have their own style as usual. So now we got Dr. Vegapunk, right? Continuing the conversation from the end of last chapter a couple weeks ago with the Straw Hats and their being saved situation, which I brought up. I'm like, yo, is Dr. Vegapunk a pirate? Now, basically, Frankie is just fanboying. Like, yo, during the time skip, well, he didn't say during the time skip, but during time skip, I was just running havoc through all of your research, all of your equipment. And there was just so much stuff I never seen. I never got a chance to see, which I think might be foreshadowing of something possibly in the future that was, you know, I won't say overlooked by Frankie, but he just didn't have enough time. He's only one man. So, you know, and just like Mark, you know, geeking out about the giant mechs and stuff like that. Now, what we do learn is, of course, this is a Vegapunk, which, you know, I won't say it was super obvious, but you never know with One Piece, right? You can go all types of ways, but we this was a thing, right? Because of the O2 thing and like the fact that it's a female and all these things, right? When we found out that this Punk Zero Two's name is Lilith, which is using that name in general is already like it has its own lore, right? Depending on what your references are, it could be the study of stars and space, and I'm pretty sure Lilith also is like has biblical references to it. So there's that part. So it might be on purpose. These different names of the different Vegapunks, like it's set up in a way where it's kind of cool, where they have their own little deal, right? As far as their personality or what drives them, what main character trait drives them, I should say. And Lilith basically mentions and was like, "Yo, I didn't save y'all. I thought I told y'all that 2 weeks ago. You're not being saved. We need money." You see all this stuff. We ran out of funding research really quick, which also dates back to Caesar, right? Scamming people for money. Like that was a part of, and that's seen in different realms of science, even in the real world, where it's like getting funding is a big deal because you're trying to break the limitations of what is capable at that time. To do that, you need incredible minds and you need incredible materials and you need incredible amount of time. Like everything has to be at its peak for it to even scratch the surface on some of this stuff. Like look at where we are now in life. So this kind of makes sense, it's unfortunate, right? Because that leads into privatization and interest and all that other stuff like that we see. Of course, once again, the underworld have no problem funding Caesar's activities, like, and then Caesar also working for the government, getting his activities funded, knowing the type of stuff that Caesar has done. They still paid him, right, to do things, or I won't say pay him, we'll say allow him to continue to live in doing so. So we see that's kind of a common theme, and that's what Lilith is on. Lilith was like, look, we need the ship. There's probably money on it. There's all types of treasures. I'm going to take the ship, right? You guys just leave. There won't be any issues. But if you don't, we're talking about Benny Siegel state property time right now. Either you get down or you lay down. I'll just take it from you. I'm a warrior. But then you see these creatures pop up out the water. We've been talking about the underwater technology and why that's impressive, right? That's not a thing in the series. It's just not a thing. Everything underwater has been Sea Kings, like except for Lost Submarine. That's pretty much it, So up until recently. So that in itself is another discussion for another time, but just, to maintain that Dr. Vegapunk is just ahead of the game in every aspect. And I do question whether these androids, like Lilith, is an actual clone, right? And it's not just a part of Vegapunk's consciousness on some pain type stuff, which Oda makes it very obvious, right? We're going the pain route with this, or, pain isn't the first character that's I don't know what to call it. That idea has been used before, right? It's just the one that most people could easily think to in the past 10, 15 years. But there's other stories that have done this before with different personalities being one person. And then like the references to Buddhism and things like that. So that's always there. Now, something that I brought up in Wano, we talked about with some of these gifters, right? With some of the different animals. There was one or two panels, at least. There was at least one that I can remember. And it was during, I think, the beginning of the Kid-in-Law versus Big Mom fight. I think it was right around that time period. But it was a wolf, a wolf-looking smile user with a giraffe. And I think there was another panel like that during the Jinbei and Who's fight. I might be wrong on that, but I definitely remember talking about that before. I was like, wow, he looks like Jabra. And then we see one that looked like a giraffe. So I was like, oh, Kaku. And then we had Derby had Cypher Pole guy in Wano. So I was like, that's kind of crazy, right? And then when Rob Lucci jumped back in the story. Now, these sea beasts, as they're called, that are weaponized, they're huge, right? They're the same size as the Vega Force number 12s. Vegapunk 12s. But these are like, this thing is the same size. Like all these creatures, like, yo, we got you surrounded. I got you surrounded. Like, I'm going to take everything. And then Nami's like, yo, how could you do this to us? And I'm just like, Nami, You shouldn't be surprised by this. Is like your level of activity. Like this is right up your alley. You shouldn't be surprised by this. Like this is how you get down. You know what I mean? But then we get over her Din Mushi, which I didn't even think about in this way, where I'm like, yo, this is either just walkie-talkie technology or Vegapunk has surpassed whatever the Din Mushi's use, which, as far as we know, is like some sort of psychic connection type of thing, to speak through the different Vegapunk. Because this Vegapunk is a different Vegapunk. It's not even the Vegapunk, as far as we know. This is 01, which you'll find out later in the chapter, which Lilith calls Shaka. I think it was named Shaka. I wanted to think Shikaku was in my head, but no, I'm pretty sure. And basically just questioning Lilith, like, why do you keep trying to rob people, man? Stop doing this. You know, our pride as scientists is being tarnished. And then Lilith says something to the effect of, does your moral codes pay the bills, basically? Like, we're broke, you know? Which, again, there's that conflict of, like, you can't really say either one. You know, of course, stealing is wrong, but, like, the Straw Hats are pirates. So it's like, you know, it's like the theory behind robbing criminals. Like, who are they going to tell? Like, they can't, you know, call the cops and, you know, you can't really do anything. So it's like that kind of mentality. But just questioning, like, hey, we don't really do this. We're true scientists. We should, you know. And when I thought about it, I was thinking about the Primal Desires line from last chapter, where Lilith is a function of Dr. Vegapunk, but Lilith goes about things her own way, right? She has personality traits. Like I was saying earlier, each one probably has something that their main motivation for how they behave, right? Whatever that concept is, and for Lilith, it's something different than the rest of them, right? Which is basically like a personality, like the movie Split. Like they're still all one person, but this is kind of how it works, right? And so the thing that Shaka mentions, and while Frankie and, of course, Sanji Sim Smoke doing what they do best, is like kind of marking out, you know, what was I saying earlier? Oh, the Jabra looking sea beast. And then we had the giraffe one, which was interesting for this chapter because of what happened. But yeah, Frankie and Sim Smoker doing what they do best. They were both fanboying just for different reasons, right? And Shaka's like, look, Lilith, you might feel like you got the upper hand right now, but you might want to chill out. You just might want to chill out. Because she's sitting there rubbing her hands, you know. I'm telling you, she's basically Nami. Because the Straw Hats are like, this ain't it. This is a new Yonko crew. And by the way, I might as well tell you now, Lilith. You see that guy over there standing there? He ain't doing nothing. He's just standing there, calm. You know who that is, Lilith? Do you know? Hailing in from the south side of Shimazuki Village. You already know what time it is. It's the Senpai, the Santo Ryu. Future world's greatest swordsman. Roronoa Zoro. Huh? He ain't moving nowhere because he can kill you from where he's standing right there. So Shaka, he knows. Like, he reads the paper, and even without the paper, he probably already knew who Zoro was, right? Why wouldn't he? For the most part, he's like the most famous Straw Hat that's not Luffy, right? Like most people, when they like, oh, that's Zoro, like they know what time it is. Okay, I don't want to get too hype. You guys know how I am. You do. There was no way I wasn't. Oh boy, even Dr. Vegapunk, man, the smartest man in the entire verse, knows. Like, nah, you might want to leave him alone. You know what I mean? And I can already see the haters, man. The Sanji Sim Smokers, man. I can already see it. But Dr. Vegapunk will also mention Robin in the same breath. True. Robin best girl. True. But y'all don't even start that. Don't you do it. Don't even think it. Because I seen some of y'all who was talking this morning, it almost came out. And I'm like, look, don't do it. Okay, just don't. Just don't. All that's saying is Lilith is weaker than Robin. It is not saying like any stretch of the imagination that Zoro is on the same level. Robin is on the same level as Zoro. Don't do it. Just don't. We just gonna drop that. Like what I heard this morning when I was telling you, like, yeah, see, y'all sounded like how people were with ZKK, and I was telling them clowns like, y'all just stop that ZKK stuff, man. Y'all wilding. You know what I mean? But Robin can end you because similar to Law or Sugar, they got a one-touch devil fruit, man. Where if you don't know what's going on, it doesn't matter who you are. It could be a rap. It could just be a rap. Just imagine if Robin had an awakening similar to Luffy's, like with Gear Fifth. Like she can already make her limbs sprout on your own body. Like it's just you don't want that smoke, you know. But I got so hyped up, I forgot what the heck I was talking about. Lil, oh yeah, not to mess with the Straw Hats. You know what I mean? But then, like, Lil is so greedy, she's just like, well, yeah, they're just Straw Hats, so that means they must have some money. You know what I mean? And I guess she was just like, well, did they hit me with the okie doke? Because I see Frankie and Usopp and Sim Smoke are they're kind of goofy. You know, how strong can these guys really be? And it's just like, no, don't ever get it messed up. So I like this Punk O1 guy, Shaka. Well, he's supposed to represent Logic, I guess, which makes sense. But he is interested in the Straw Hats, which is something I had talked about before. Like Dr. Vegapunk seems like he has some sort of interest in the Straw Hats prior, right, to them being here. You can make the argument of the Kuma thing, but even that looks kind of, I won't say sketchy, but I it's just something that always made sense to me. Like, if he knows Luffy's not with them, his interest in the Straw Hats that are here now are for a totally different reason, unless it's connected to where he's going to put, it's going to be one of those arcs where, I don't know, man, like he puts the Straw Hats in some weird situation they can't really do nothing about, and then Luffy, you guys know how that can go. I don't really know for the time being, but the fact that even though Shaka told Lilith that she can't just take the Straw Hats because she'll die, he still says bring them to him, which Zoro also responds like, hey, if you're Dr. Vegapunk, I got a favor I want to ask of you. Now, I didn't see that coming. And, we were talking this morning, and I heard the most reasonable idea that I heard that we talked about was that, what did he say? Oh, that Zoro would be there for, like, ask about if they're, like, the cure for Smile. And I was like, you know what? That kind of makes sense because we just saw the, how can I put this? The devastation that Caesar caused being reversed. And Smile fruits are a byproduct of Caesar. So we'd see once again where Dr. Vegapunk one-up Caesar in a different way where, if he messes something up, Dr. Vegapunk can fix it. I don't know how that would work because we have an idea on how smiles work, but I don't think we really know. I'm pretty sure Dr. Vegapunk is aware of smiles. Like, if Orochi or Hochi was asking for Dr. Vegapunk, then there's a good chance that it had something to do with smile fruits in general and technology. So odds are Dr. Vegapunk is aware of smiles and probably finds them like beneath, a representation of what science is supposed to be, like their failed experiments too. So maybe he does do something. Other than that, I really couldn't think of why Zoro would want anything from Dr. Vegapunk, considering we've never seen Zoro even mention Dr. Vegapunk ever the entire series. So I don't know if it's related to that or it somehow tied to Ryuma. Like, I'm still holding on to the Ryuma thing. Y'all know that might be, that's stretching it. But that was really the only things I can think of on what he would want. It's not, I don't think it has anything to do with swords. Actually, you know what? It might have something to do with Enma. I don't know. I'll have to hold back on. I'll hold off on that for a while, for the time being. But that was really all I could come up with as far as that. But I just thought that was really crazy for Zoro of all people. He's never really asked for anything, but for him to want something from somebody, it has to be of some importance. So again, it wasn't a big part of the chapter, but to me, for obvious reasons, it kind of stood out because it's just like, when does he do that? Like, Maybe he learned something that we're not aware of yet. Actually, he died, technically. Huh. Oh, well, I'm getting sidetracked. But after that, basically, we cut to Luffy and the rest of them. And Jury Bonnie is like basically explaining that she's been here before, but as a kid. Now, that pretty much confirms that something that we were kind of talked about with her being stuck as a kid. Was it because she's actually, right, a child, which kind of wouldn't make any sense, but was it because that's the form she was in, right, when she was in the water? So, like, you can't use your ability, but everything about it doesn't go away because we know, like, to a certain extent, Luffy is still rubber underwater. He might be an exception just because of how his ability works, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it kind of makes more sense this way. But what I didn't see coming, which, people have talked about this before in the past, but it was just something that, like, to me, I never really, I won't say I didn't believe it. It's just not, I don't know, it's just like whatever. It's Kuma being Bonnie's father. A lot of the time when I think about those two, I kind of always thought it was the other way around. I don't think it necessarily changed anything because it's still, a bloodline a connection, like a family connection. But at the same time, it was just kind of like Yamato being female, it's just like, huh, or, the situation where it's just like, I didn't really think about that heavy. I don't think it's good or bad. It's just different. Like we knew there had to be some connection to him, but and it also makes me question, how did she get her fruit then? Like, did she get it because of the rev? And, like, when did, you know what I mean? That's a whole nother conversation. But I thought that was pretty, I don't know. It just made me, like, stop and think for a second because I just didn't really think about it like that. But that one small detail kind of, changes what the course of actions could have been chronologically that brought us to this point. Like, why Kuma would even agree to this in the first place, So Bonnie, it's like, yo, my father was turned into a cyborg. And Luffy, he only knows how to be himself. Of course, he would think that. Like, he would want to be turned into a cyborg. Like, he would think that's cool. He just doesn't understand the same way. Jinbei is like, bro, like, come on, man. That's not what's hot on the streets. And then Luffy being like, oh, I kind of messed up. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, she gets to talking and Luffy's just like, man, I do not care about your backstory, man. I just like whoever your pops is, even though, your pop should have killed me, but with the time skip should have never happened. And if it wasn't for the Senpai, the Santoryu, like the series wouldn't even still be going. But at the same time, F your backstory, man. I'm hungry. Where the food at? You know what I mean? Like Luffy is. And there's only one person like that, man. This dude he's amazing. He's an amazing idiot. Like, I don't know how else to put that. But, like I said, Jinbei is horrified because he knows what that probably really means, like on a better scale than Luffy does, especially considering what happened during the time skip where Jinbei was probably traveling and he was the one to inform the Straw Hats on what had been happening. He knows quite a bit. Now, calling her Bogey, like the Bogey nickname for me, I told y'all last week, that's funny. But Bogey doesn't have a chance to bring up Sabo. And she's like, oh, I guess I'll spill the beans later. Now, the fact is that she says spill the beans. Like, oh, I saw Sabo and Mary Joie. There's no reason to bring that up unless, like, there's some information missing from the paper, more than likely, which Luffy didn't believe or care about that situation to begin with. But there has to be a reason. This is the second time in a row Oda did this, man. Stop doing this, man. Stop telling characters that they'll talk about stuff later, like the Robin thing. Oh, Luffy, would you like me to tell you what's going on else in the newspaper? I know that's his thing, but sometimes it's annoying. But at least we have confirmation that she is aware of, like, Sabo and what was going on, which her ties to the Rev are probably even crazier now, right? Depending on how long Kuma was in the Rev when he joined. He could have been a revolutionary before she was even born. We just don't know. And then, like, how does that tie to his name being Bartholomew Kuma the Tyrant? Is that, was he really actually a tyrant and a bad king and doing wild stuff? Or is this one of those WG type things? You know what I mean? Where they make things out in a way that didn't really happen, or they are allowed to portray someone a certain way that just stays that way until proven different, right? It could be one of those things. So I don't know which one that is, but, I look forward to finding out. But then we really see where they're at. The double spread. Like, this is, it's just a whole bunch of adventure based, and we see a space monster, which is funny to me because me and Laz, we talk about Don, and some of the recent chapters, I won't say they're exactly like Don, but it's in that area of sci-fi, but still anime. It's not like we're not talking about Gundam level sci-fi, but like, it's a very similar series in the way it uses comedy and stuff like that. But it's almost like if you took, I actually don't have a way to explain it. I told you I'm going to talk about that series eventually. But it's funny to me because we have a space monster. Luffy calls it somebody calls it a space monster, right? This banana head, double-headed dragon looking thingamajig. But the term space kaiju has been in my vocabulary the past few weeks because of Don. So for a minute, I was calling these creatures space kaidos, because to be kaiju and kaido are like the same thing, right? So it's just like been an ongoing joke between me and Laz about space kaidos. So with Luffy calling it a space monster, I was like, that's kind of interesting, right? We got space, and you see these different pods, and I've seen this in like a few sci-fi movies where, like, in the future, we basically live in these different pods, and you travel through like a rail system of some sort, and there is no more, like, you're outside, you're still in a pod. Like, I know you guys have seen movies like that, so that's kind of reminded like some Jetsons type stuff. And it looks like a massive place. If you think about how big the space Kaido is, the banana head space Kaido, this place is huge. And like we talked about, it should be obvious, right? There's no way that Dr. Vegapunk never had an interest in space. So the fact that all of these buildings look like rockets, I wouldn't even be surprised if some of them worked, right? And they've left the planet before. Again, this is one of those things we're not aware of, where Enel going to the moon in the Arc Maxim is probably not the first or last time people from the One Piece world went to the moon. Clearly they haven't. It's impossible because the Skypians have hieroglyphics there. And just like we've seen, somebody had brought up, it was during the cover story, I think it was the Aesop Lucy flashback, which is weird how I forgot about that of all. It might be around the same time, maybe not exactly. But we had there was a scientist from the same place as Vegapunk, and he was working on his version of the automaton, whatever, the automatic robot dudes, the ones that was getting low diff by the Goofy, like, and when I say Goofy, I don't mean the word Goofy, but one of them actually looked like Goofy from Disney, the Space Pirates, when they were getting low diff before Enel does what he does best. And so I was like, oh, you know what, this, even though they're not talking about space right now, with Vegapunk number 12, when it was called Vega Force, I had told y'all that stuck in my head. Like, I'm almost positive before we leave this arc, Vegapunk mentioned something about space, right? There's just no way. Like, there's no way someone that involved in the scientific community is just like, especially with Lilith being a potential name, as far as being related to astronomy. So it's just like, and then in general, back in the days in the pirate world, they actually used the stars to travel. So that's not like nothing new, that those are connected. So, and then stars in the series mean something different. But even the Seraphim, right? Bo Hancock's eyes have a star in them. Stars are like important as far as mythology is concerned. So I was like thinking about all that crazy stuff. And then, Luffy being Luffy, he's like, oh, I'm going to take a ride on the dragon. And it's funny, like, we saw these rockets, and what is the thing Luffy uses a lot, Goma no rocket, like, as far as his gags are concerned. That was the other thing I forgot about that I thought was like, whoa, see, Gear 5th is really affecting Luffy. because his gags are so much different now. You guys know I keep bringing that up, and we see even in this chapter when I'll talk about it later. But it stuck in my head when I was talking about what's going to happen now with the holograms, because Luffy goes to ride this dragon. Dragon, watch the dragon. Like it's impossible for my brain not to do that, but he goes right through it. So I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, oh, you know what? And the first thing I thought about was Stealth Black, right? Law had brought up how his invisibility works. So we find out that there's holograms in the story now. It makes so much sense because the German tech was already doing something similar, right? When Law explained why Sanji could turn invisible, it's really just like I talked about that during that chapter, was similar to real life, right? Where we have something that can project light a certain way, where it basically just projects, like, say if I'm looking at something, it's projecting the exact amount of light back at me so I can see nothing, even though something is there. Like, this technology exists. It's not anything new. So the holograms probably function somewhere in the realm of that area, right? That kind of thing, right? So that's where my mind was. And then they have food holograms. And you got one character that loves sweets, and then the other two just love food in general. So they were done, and they're gonna go for it. And Jinbei's like, bro, what are you doing? Like, even if that food is real, why would you eat that? Like, nothing about here is good, Like, it could be laced with Karoseki. You don't know. Like, he didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. Like, what happens if a devil fruit user eats sea stone? Like, or, what if someone put sea stone salt in the food? Now, most devil fruit users, from what we've seen, are aware of sea stone energy. So I don't think they just pick it up and start chewing, right? But they weren't paying attention. I was just, And so Jinbei's like, yeah, this is probably a trap. Probably you should be leaving this stuff alone, right? And Jinbei says he's never seen a hologram before, but he's aware of what they are. That is wild because of how old he is, like, relative to the story anyway. Like, the fact that he's heard of a hologram, even though he's never seen one, this is like probably advanced, even by One Piece standards, And like Bonnie knew about it because like I was talking about with all the comic books and sci-fi, and Oda basically telling you where we're going with this. And this is where Luffy. This is what I noticed, and when I was talking about his awakening affecting his gags. He straight up turned Super Saiyan. Like, the smoke came out and everything. I don't want to call it Super Saiyan, but ever since, like, when I first started reading this story, Dragon Ball, like, one of the first things he did, his name is Monkey D. Luffy. It's kind of hard not to see. He does. He's very monkey-like, right? It's just, it's a thing. So it's kind of hard not to think that. But then you see him do this, and you're like, okay, Gear 5th is, I won't say controlling him, but the Toon Force is popping out way more. Like, we've seen it almost every chapter. Like, I like it. I'm not even complaining about it, but I am noticing, like, it's been a lot more frequent than it's ever been. Again, like I was talking about before, he never used his ability as a part of his gag. So now that it is, it's like, it just stands out every time I see it. But he looked pretty clean. I ain't gonna lie. Like, that looked kind of dope. But, he basically did that because he's just like, holograms, what are they? And, and Luffy, I don't even know if he knows what a comic book is, right? It's still not necessarily known how well he can read at all. So I doubt he would. Like, dude, Luffy grew up in the middle of nowhere, Fuchsia Village, right? Ain't no internet out there. He did not read. This man was in the jungles. Like, they didn't read comic books like Law did. You know what I mean? So he has no idea what a hologram is, what you're talking about. Like, this dude can barely read his own bounty. Do you think he's going to understand the concept of a hologram? It's just not happening, right? He fell for the Dofi clone for how long? Like, this is Luffy we're talking about here. But, I just thought that part was interesting. And then we get like an exposition because Jinbei is basically assuming that the robot must be a hologram too, which I don't know about that one. Like, this could be one of those things like in Wano, or one of the things where it was deceit, right? And then Oda already messes around with the fake outs and stuff like that. So there might be a point where you're gonna think something's a hologram and somebody about is gonna get bodied because it's not gonna be a hologram. Like it's just gonna clap somebody. That's probably what's gonna happen. But we do get some exposition by some. I don't know what this character is supposed to represent. Maybe it's just random character. But all I thought about was they what was that movie with Jetpack Joyride, and this character kind of looks like that old school Astro Boy era, like old cartoons, like Betty Boop, like the way her face is drawn and stuff. Like this kind of reminds me of that. So I don't know if that's where he's going with some of these characters. As far as lore, I have no idea what this character is supposed to represent. As far as like the design, now having a jetpack is interesting, but this kid, this I don't even we didn't know her name at the time, but Atlas starts explaining, like giving us exposition on this island. So like Jinbei's after he said what he said, the giant robot just starts talking out of nowhere. I don't know how that's going to be in anime, but basically, like, oh, well, if this island is supposed to be cold, how come it's not freezing here? And like the robot or Wrath brings up like that it's called Island Aircon, which I hear aircon and my brain just does Con Air because that movie is hilarious. But and it also made me think about what Bonnie says about everything in this island being a sham. So I don't know if that, again, there might be little sentences that are foreshadowing for some of the themes that are going to be coming up here. But that was like pretty much where my mind was. I was like, oh, everything is a sham, huh? You know what I mean? After what we were just talking about. But basically, the temperature could be regulated all the way to the dirt. That's wild to be able to. That means it can control solid, liquid, and gas simultaneously, similar to what the sun does. So I don't know how that machine works. I don't know how he does it, but it's Dr. Vegapunk, man. So, who cares? But mentioning the soil again, because Anel has been on my mind. All I thought about was Fairy Verth, even though it has nothing to do with this chapter. But it's just like, why is regulating the temperature? I'm like, oh, duh. So you can't, so you can grow places where you can grow things in places where you normally shouldn't be able to, right? Like a winter island being able to have normal crops. Like that wouldn't even make any sense. But with aircon, which you guys can hear by I'm talking about this stuff, there's going to be a video just on Vegapunk and what I think is kind of going on here with these different representations and why they have their own word for what represents them. I don't think it's just like a pain thing, even though, again, it's made obvious that this is like some pain type stuff. But, it's just really weird. And then like Luffy just sees the robot like, oh, you're as big as Kaido. And it reminded me of when they were in, I want to say Pizu Town, maybe, when they first met Kiku. No, they weren't in Pizu Town with Kiku. It wasn't Kiku. It was Osuru, I think. No, it was Kiku because Luffy was getting ready to say, I'm Monkey D. Luffy. And then Zoro was like, what are you doing? But it reminded me of, why was I bringing this up again? Oh, the comment he made about Big Mom being bigger. Like, that's what I thought Luffy was doing right here. But then he goes, like, he's going to go fight this thing. And I'm like, what are you... And then he calls it a hollow hollow. Hollow hollow. And I thought about Perona. And then I'm like, okay, just saying hollow hollow. Even Oda knows, right? October 10th is going down. He's ready for Bleach, too. It's not just us. But, he calls it a hollow hollow and he goes to fight it. Like he's going to go punch it. And this thing just straight Nami diffs him. Basically, that's what he got Nami diffed. Where, Nami can low diff Luffy just like that quicker than Kaido did. And he hit that vending machine and then the food in the vending machine actually works compared to the holograms. And the Atlas android or whatever we're calling them for the time being gets angry about lack of funding, which again you tell where I'm going with this, where I tie back to Lilith, right? Where Lilith and Atlas might have similar goals, right? Where they don't care how they get the money. This stuff needs, because she goes off And then we learn about these photonic gloves, which I'm sure they exist for some purpose outside of Kizaru, but being able to interact with light is wild. And being able to change perception and those philosophy comments where I'm like, yo, we start to sound like the Matrix too. Like when Neo went in that room with the Colonel Sanders looking dude and he started talking that nonsense. Like that's exactly the vibe that I was getting from some of the stuff that what Alice was talking about. But she was angry. It was like, well, this thing should be mass produced. And I thought about something. This is something the Gorosei wouldn't want out there because that means everybody has equal abilities of gaining food, which means some of this stuff, like all their money that they spend on heavily tribute, like you see where I'm going with this. Some of Vegapunk's inventions are probably kept from the public on purpose to keep the people in a lower state of being, in a sense, right? Because the less access you have to food, odds are you're not going to live that long or be successful. Like there's just a huge thing of studies on how just having a secure food supply changes like the economic stabilization of countries, not just like that generation, but it trends into other generations. Like it's a real thing. So that's kind of where my mind was going. I was like, so we have a way to control weather, which can have to do with crops and survivability, right? We've seen some places in One Piece that are almost not survivable. Like look what Crocodile did to Alabasta. Even though Alabasta was already in a desert, survivability was a big problem. Growing things is a big problem. So we see the two things, like regulating a habitat and the ability to produce food, like this vending machine, saying like, oh, well, this vending machine could turn raw ingredients into unique dishes. Which, Sanji probably starts sweating somewhere, got a cold chill down his back, like, yo, am I going to be replaced by Frankie somehow? You know what I mean? Like, you can never replace Sanji, but you get my point. And she was getting really mad. And what she was talking about was basically what? Lack of funding, lack of engineers who can't even follow blueprints, which means, again, a lack of resources for this thing to be mass produced. Why would she want to mass produce? Is it just for money or just because she thinks it's a really good, Dr. Vegapunk understands it's a great invention, but it'll never see the light of day? Like how it was for even stuff like the internet. People thought if you look at the history of the internet, we were talking about like 60s, 70s, spy type stuff. They thought the internet would never be a normal thing. So I don't know if that's like the area that's being played around with here, but that's kind of the mindset where, although Dr. Vegapunk, based on like Shaka's logic, is a good person, the other Dr. Vegapunks have no problem exercising other means of stabilization for funding so they can continue their research and create things that change the world. So that's kind of where my mindset is at as far as like these iterations of Dr. Vegapunk where, they're all going to be different. And it's not, again, like, I'll get into that in its own separate video. But that's basically what I was thinking about. Because I'm like, okay, well, being able to cook unique dishes out of random food, right, in under a minute is wild, right? And then we learned about the photon gloves, and then the fact that, like, Punk Atlas's nickname is Wrath, which that name has been used in a couple of series, right? Full Metal Alchemist. So anytime you hear Wrath, you should already know what time it is. And then that wasn't great enough. If all that wasn't enough, we get to the end of the chapter. What do we see? My man Robert D. Gucci McLucci hanging out again with Stussy and Kaku on their way to Egghead. Hey, listen, y'all. I don't care what you think about what happened between now and then. There's no way that Oda's bringing these cats back in the story just for them to get low diffed. Like, I'm not saying, I don't even think Rob Lucci can be, like, if Sanji and Rob Lucci fight, right, that's no disrespect to either one of them, especially because of Stampede and stuff where it's like, yo, these dudes might actually scrap. They might actually, because we know Sanji's not fighting Stussy. That ain't happening. It's just not happening. But he could really fight Rob Lucci. Kaku could have gotten better. Not enough to. I don't think anybody in Cypher Pole has fought anyone the level of. Oh no! I mean, what? Gleb Kaido, but That doesn't mean they could. That doesn't mean they won't be a threat. I'm sure Oda understands. Like usually when prior threats come back into the story, they're just almost impossible for them to be a major threat again. I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't want to power scale them. I don't think they're strong as the Straw Hat crew. Like honestly, if you told me Luffy could beat two of them simultaneously, that wouldn't be crazy at all. If you told me Zoro or Sanji could do it, and it wouldn't be that crazy to me at all. So it's kind of hard. Like it's hard for me to be honest and fair about, but also using logic. Because to me, the Cypher Ball has no business fighting the Straw Hats like at all. But just because we think it can't happen, it must mean they. You figure like, okay, well, who's who? He was able to fight Jinbei and he got low diffed. And if Rob Lucci is still stronger than him, that means like who should he be fighting? Somebody in a monster trio, right? Like he's not beating Luffy. Like, I just don't see it. Like unless he could probably beat Luffy in terms of stamina, because that's still Luffy's weakness. As much as people want to overlook that, right? The longevity. The longer the fight goes on, it really technically really isn't in his favor compared to how other characters would, right? Because of how his ability functions. It's just that he can endure stuff he ain't got no business being able to endure, to the point where he can die now. But their mission, which they chose to accept because it's the Goro saying you don't have a choice, is to bring back a Seraphim who looks like Kuma. And when I seen the star on his chest, I'm like, yo, see, Oda knows Bleach is coming. Because I'm like, I got masculine demasked vibes. Like, obviously, they're nowhere near the same type of character. But that is like seeing Kuma with a goofy design on him. The only thing goofy about Kuma is his legs. Like, he got them Blackbeard legs. His shoes look like shoes from Disney. Like, if you look at Goofy's shoes, it's just random shoes. Like, that's what they look like. But they're there to kill Vegapunk. Don't damage everything and kill all the Vegapunks. And Rob Lucci was like, yo, does this have something to do with Lelouch? Now, the way Lucci is portrayed is just to be a dog, right? A dog of the Shogunate character. I'm not, like I said before he came back in the story, the way that their cover story is told, regardless of what translation you read, it has like implications of Rob Lucci faking the funk, where he might try something against the world government at some point, right? Because he didn't want him or the rest of the Cypher Pole to be chased, right? So him showing up to Wano was kind of odd. Him getting he left Cypher Pole and got a promotion. Well, who was kicked out of I don't want to say he was in Cypher Pole, but when they kicked him to the side because of what happened to the Gumbo Gumbo, he couldn't come back and work for the government after a failure. Rob Lucci technically failed and ran from the government for a period of time, and he was still able to come back and work for them. So you have to wonder what his motivations are, because he doesn't need to work for them to do what he supposedly likes to do best, and that's just murking people. He don't need to work for them to do that. It's almost like he can just do that as he sees fit. He's Rob Lucci. It is what it is. But the fact he chooses to stay in Cypher Pole to the point now he's questioning things where we didn't hear him do that before. He never questioned why they wanted the blueprints from Iceberg. He didn't care about that. He was just like, go get them, and that's it. This time around, he's like, yo, I'm not even going to question the Robin thing. He knows exactly why the world government wants Robin. That's never going to change. However, Lelouch happened, and now we're supposed to off Vegapunk, the most useful person in this entire verse. And then, like I was just saying earlier, he has these inventions that would literally change humanity of how the One Piece world functions. Just being able to take raw ingredients and basically a better version of Strussen's fruit through technology is a big deal for their verse, because everybody in their verse besides the royal families are poor. Like, they're either regular people or they're below average. Like, they're just straight. Most of them are what we've seen from the countries, they're impoverished. That's why revolution was so easy for them. Like, when it finally happened, you seen the big tidal wave, because they're all tired of the same leaders. They're all tired of paying royal tribute. Like, even with Big Mom, people would rather give up literally part of their life to live in a somewhat balanced lifestyle, with the exception of Big Mom's, rages and stuff like that. But for the most part, Like the people at Whole Cake Island are there because they want to be. It's just that the type of contract they have is literally soul binding. So it's a bit different situation where, these things introduced in the story would change things, right? What if the air conditioning or con air air con island air con, if you could put that anywhere could basically be as fruitful as Greenbit, and just like the situation with Greenbow with him intentionally or unintentionally, bringing the nature back into Wano. We have devices here that can replicate some of the same things. So that's the only reason I can think of, besides that him being Dr. Vegapunk, and they think they have, maybe the world government thinks they have it figured out today where they don't even need him anymore. And this was something that I talked about during the Sabo chapters where usually, at least within human history, right? Well, that's the only history that we know. Forces only make those type of moves when they think they have an advantage no one else has. And we've seen from the Lelouja, which never existed in the first place, that they have an advantage that no one else has. However, if the ancient weapons existed before Vegapunk, that means he's, at some point, there were minds that were just as good as him. It's just that in this current iteration of the story, he's the, superior brain force as far as inventions and stuff like that is concerned, and pushing the limits of humanity. You know what I mean? So it's just like kind of wild that the Seraphim has to come back because it's a problem child. Or it's like, again, we're going back to a previous chapter where Dr. Vegapunk talking about primal desires not being able to be overridden. It's just something that happens. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you copy Kuma, because it's based on Kuma's DNA, how he is and the way his story is told about soul and essence and stuff, it's so ingrained into him to where he's not going to listen 100% of the time. And there might be certain things where it's like if you take him on a mission, you might fail because of it. And he's too strong. And if the Seraphim, as far as devil fruit abilities is concerned, can be copied in the same, in some of the theorized ways that they have been, Kuma's a problem. Like, we don't talk about it because we don't get to see him fight in the verse, but he has one of the most disgusting devil fruits because it works on things that aren't physical, like pain and fatigue. I've talked about this before. Like, you guys know my top as far as like the weird devil fruits that can be problematic. It's Law, Big Mom, Sugar, and Kuma. Like, they're up there. It has nothing to do with destructive force or any of that. They're things that been the reality of how the series functions to even the characters in the series. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? So that's a big deal, and especially, and then with Luffy Fruits now with Gear Fear the Force, like we've reached that realm where it's like you need Vegapunk in these chapters to actually explain stuff, because Oda can't do it through normal characters. It wouldn't make any sense for them to know that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So wanting to have him erased from the annals of history, so to speak, to quote the Gorosei, it's because they either have a replacement or he's a threat to them, right? They're not just doing this out of nowhere. They've probably planned to do this for quite some time. They were just waiting for him to finish probably the Seraphim, which also ties back to the old theories about, Order 66 and Kuma and things. This is probably why, because Vegapunk, which I had already kind of theorized, where it wouldn't make any sense if he wasn't aware that there was an instant messenger or something. How that plays into a role from him, I have no idea. But the fact that he has spaceships for buildings and stuff like that, stuff we've never seen anywhere else in the series. He also has information no one else has in the series. And again, this guy was able to copy Kaido basically in the form of Momo, which I guess that's another reason Zoro could be there. But I don't understand why, we haven't seen any drawbacks for Momo's ability, so I don't understand why you would ask about Momo. But that's something else I just thought about right now. But them wanting him dead is very concerning for the rest of the series, because if they're willing to kill the most useful person, like even Yuha Bach didn't do that. He was like, hey, Urahara, could you come work for me, man? Because I really don't want to deal with you, bro. Like, I'd rather just hire you. And we see this in real life with competitors where I'd rather just buy you. I just can't keep fighting this fight. You're too good. Just come work for me and we can make a lot of money. Like, you guys seen that story before. And it's just like Vegapunk probably taught them so much through the cloning. Like, I think this cloning thing is what, because in all intents and purposes, the Gorosei, right, or Instant Messenger Sama, with this type of technology, they could always go somewhere else and create a new world or destroy the world and rebuild it from new with clones, right? Like I talked about with Judge's clones. The difference between what we've seen, like with Vegapunk, is Vegapunk gives the option of freedom, or he hasn't been able to totally suppress it. Like even the German kids, they don't necessarily have zero emotions. It's just certain emotions they don't display. Like Ichiji and Niji were probably more monotone, right? But when it came to Nami, right, they had those type of things, and then Reiju has her own emotions. So it's like something that was always, I won't say mistranslated, but misused, is that the German kids were emotionless. That's not the case, right? Because there's different varying emotions, and Judge probably couldn't override those things either. Like even with Sanji's situation, even though Sanji is totally different, he thought, right, and this is similar to what probably, oh man, I can't believe I forgot. This is probably the same thing as Silvers thinks about Killua, is you can go do whatever you want. You'll come back and do things the way I want you to anyway. So it was like one of those type of things where they thought that something would work a certain way, and then it's not going to work that way. But I get sidetracked just even talking about that. I didn't mean to go this long, but man, the end of the chapter was just wild, man. So we'll talk more about that obviously on it. Man, if you made it this far, you're a real one. I appreciate it, and I also realized I'm gonna start doing it. And you'll notice in videos, in this one, and I'm gonna try to go back and do older videos. I'm gonna add subtitles because for whatever reason, I'm seeing that there's other countries that are interested in listening, and with some of my references and stuff, I guess I never really thought about that part. So I'll start. I know the subtitles can be really weird, but for some people, I guess it helps them. So I'm going to start adding the subtitles now. So look forward to that. We might talk again tomorrow. Possibly, I might not wait till Monday. I have some free time coming up because I really want to talk about the Vegapunk thing more, like more, right? But you gotta stay safe out there. Have your fun this weekend with your One Piece stuff, and we already know, son. Bleach will be here Monday. You already know where I'm finna be. Front and center. So, yeah, I think that's it. Bye, y'all.